Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We've got a really good crowd with us this evening. My name is Jennifer Rubin. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Orange, Durham, and Chatham counties. And I'm happy to welcome you all to our Hot Topics for April, where we're going to hear from 3 judges and learn about how the system works firsthand. We have, I think, all learned a lot over the past couple of years about how influential and how important our court system is. So I think really looking forward to hearing from our judges today and really appreciate you participating in our program today. So if you would all mute yourselves so that we can give our speakers our full attention, that would be fabulous. And if you have questions as we go, feel free to put those in the chat. I think Jan Sherwin is going to be monitoring that, and we'll be able to make sure that we get your questions to our speakers at the end of the program. And with that, I will turn it over to Vicki Shea, who is one of the leaders of the Chatham unit. Vicki.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. It's my pleasure to introduce the 3 judges who will be speaking to us and answering questions today. Judge Alan Baddour is the Senior Superior Court Judge in Orange and Chatham counties. He has been a Superior Court Judge since 2006, and before that he was an Assistant District Attorney based in Chatham, and before that in private practice. Judge Samantha Cabe is the Chief District Court Judge in Orange and Chatham, having been a District Court Judge since 2016. Before that, she was in the private practice of law for 14 years. Judge Shamieka Rhinehart is a Superior Court Judge in Durham County, having recently been appointed to that position by Governor Cooper after being a District Court Judge in Durham since 2017. So we're going to begin by having Judge Baddour describe our district and superior court districts and what these courts do. Judge Baddour.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with you all. Can you hear me okay? Someone give me a thumbs up just to make sure. All right, great. So first of all, let's see the best way to start. It's a big cycle, and sometimes it's hard to know where exactly to start. But as Vicki mentioned, I'm a Superior Court Judge. She has now put on the screen the District Court districts, and so I'll go ahead. No, that's fine. I can start there. So Judge Cabe is a better person to talk details of District Court, but in general, what I will tell you is that our District Court judges, first of all trial judges handle both civil and criminal cases. In District Court, the criminal cases are primarily misdemeanors, and in civil and traffic court, and in civil court, they are primarily civil actions for $25,000 or less, and also the other big area is family and juvenile law, including juvenile delinquency, so sort of criminal charges for juveniles. So that's the big work that they do. And if you were to squeeze into that map, you would see that Orange and Chatham is a district, that they're in yellow there. Durham, you all are the league from these 3 counties. That's why I'm talking about these 3. Durham is its own district. Those judges, District Court judges, are elected. They serve 4-year terms. There is a Chief District Court Judge, Judge Cabe in Orange and Chatham, and then for us, there are 4 other District Court judges. Judges will typically rotate between Chapel Hill, Hillsborough, Pittsboro, and Siler City. In Durham, they would all be in Durham City all the time. So that's a little bit. We'll talk more in a minute. Superior Court, as I said, that's what I am. We are lucky in that we get to serve 8-year terms, so we have to run less often, and Judge Cabe is always mad at me about that. But we hear criminal and civil cases. On the criminal side, there are typically felonies, On the civil side, they are actions for $25,000 or more. One other big distinction to make is that in Superior Court, we typically use juries to help us resolve our cases. And in District Court, they are typically bench trials, or the judge acts as the jury as well as the judge. Now, pretty much every single thing I told you has an exception, but that's the general gist of both District and Superior Court. Just to flesh out the rest of the state court system, we have appellate courts as well. There's the Court of Appeals. There are 15 Court of Appeals members. They also serve 8-year terms, and they typically serve in panels of 3. So a case that's appealed from either District or Superior Court would be heard by 3 judges on the Court of Appeals. There is also a North Carolina Supreme Court, again, 8-year terms. Those judges, there are 7 of those judges, and they would hear their cases all together. So all of them would hear. I will just very briefly talk about how we come to get to be in these jobs, and then step aside and let my colleagues talk for a minute as well. Typically, well, so judges are elected in North Carolina. When there is a vacancy, as you just heard reference with Judge Rhinehart, trying to think of who, she'll remind me. I'm blanking right now, but anyway, someone retired. And,
Judge Hudson.
Thank you, Judge Hudson. So when there's a vacancy, the governor can appoint a replacement, and that person would serve in the seat until essentially the next even year election. And so then we run for office on the ballot that everyone is familiar with. When I started in 2006, the elections were nonpartisan, so there were no D or R by our names, and if there were multiple candidates, if there were enough people, you would have a primary, and if there were only, typically one opponent, you would just have a general election. The top vote getter would get it, and again, it was nonpartisan, so everyone would vote if there was a primary, and of course everyone would vote in the general. The elections return to partisan elections. Gosh, I don't know what year.
2020.
2020. Thank you, Judge Cabe. And so now you will see a letter by most of our names, and that is for District, Superior, and both appellate level courts.
It may have returned in 2018, but I didn't run. Judge Rhinehart and I both ran for the first time as partisan in 2020.
We did. I remember that. It was nonpartisan in 2015, 2016 we ran. So yeah.
Judge Baddour, did you want to talk about this at all?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So, I'm sorry, I should have done that. As I mentioned to you, the district court judges in a multi-county district or in places where there are multiple courthouses, like Orange or Chatham, will kind of rotate within the county. Superior courts have one courthouse in each county, except for, again, there's an exception to everything I say. So Guilford County has 2 courthouses, one in High Point and one in Greensboro, but the other 99 have one courthouse where all the Superior Court is held. And yet we, according to the Constitution, rotate. When the Constitution was first implemented, we rotated statewide, and there were something like 6 or 8 judges for the whole state. Obviously, that's changed. I think we now have about 100 and 110 Superior Court judges, and we rotate typically within a division. So as you can see on this map here, Orange and Chatham are in the yellow. Sorry, we're in the green, and Durham is in the blue. Up until about 3 or 4 years ago, Orange, Chatham, Wake, Durham, we were all in a centrally located division in the middle of the state. So I'd spend almost all my time in Orange, Chatham, Raleigh, or Durham. Well, Raleigh, Durham, and Orange got broken up a few years ago. I typically drive through Alamance County, which is no longer in my division, and go to Winston-Salem or Greensboro. Rhinehart goes points north and east, and if you're a Wake County judge would go south and over to Cumberland and so forth like that. So we can be assigned our 6-month rotations. Would have me, for example, in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County for 6 months. I would typically be going there week in and week out for court. If I ever have a week where I'm not assigned, I can be sent anywhere they need me in the whole state. So I would never go there for 6 months. Judge Rhinehart would never go there for 6 months, but I could go to Charlotte for a week or however long the trial takes. And speaking of that, district court is typically, their sessions are daily sessions. So they might be, let's say, criminal court in Chapel Hill on Tuesday. And that judge would go and hold court on Tuesday as long as the case is took. In Superior Court, we are assigned by the week. So I would have civil or criminal court, and let's say it's in Charlotte, and I go there Monday morning and I start a trial and it turns out it's a 4-week trial. Well, I'm going to Charlotte for 4 weeks in a row. In the second week of a trial in Hillsborough right now. So you in some ways, you never kind of know what you're getting into. But again, our trials, once a judge starts a trial, that judge has to finish the trial. You can't replace the judge. So that's a little bit more about what we all do, and I think I'd like to be quiet and let some of my colleagues talk. That's my question.
He's so funny.
What? Judge Rhinehart, do you want to add anything since you've been in both district and?
Oh, wow. Well, it's interesting because I was a district court judge for six years, and I've been a Superior Court judge since April the 10th. And so I am just as new as a newborn baby judge in Superior Court land. But to give perspective, the difference is certainly what Judge Baddour talked about. I mean, I consider us like pilots in Superior Court, where we get the assignment and then next thing you know, we're going to the next county or the county that we're assigned, and then we have to preside. In District Court, you're literally going, in Durham County, you're going either, down the elevator to the floor where the courtroom is. And so it's exciting. It's exciting to see the difference in how courts operate, whether it's rural, whether it's a metropolitan city or a big city like Raleigh or the smaller city like Chatham. And so that has been very, very fascinating with respect to how the court staff works, how the attorneys, argue and present their cases. And so I'm really, really enjoying it. So, yeah.
And Judge Cabe, you've just been in Hillsborough and Chatham, right?
Yeah. Today I was in Pittsburgh, so we just go back and forth. As Judge Baddour stated, we have 4 courthouses in our district. Our main courthouses are in Hillsborough and Pittsburgh, but we have satellite courthouses in Chapel Hill and Siler City. And we typically hold, in Chapel Hill and Siler City, we hold criminal court. And then in Chapel Hill, we also hold our treatment courts. We have 2 different drug treatment courts in Orange County. We have a family treatment court for individuals who are involved with the Department of Social Services due primarily to substance use disorder. And then we also have a criminal recovery court where individuals who have been usually convicted of crimes that are related to drugs in either district or Superior Court can be ordered to complete recovery court as a condition of their probation. And both of the programs are a year-long program and really focus on treatment and accountability for completing treatment. So we do that in Chapel Hill as well.
And we also have specialty courts in Durham in the district court. We have adult drug treatment court. We lost our family drug treatment court about 12 years ago, but we do have, and we also have mental health treatment court as well in Durham as a specialty court.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing these maps and get faces and names at least back down. So the local league has prepared some questions, but again, we also want to invite audience members to type their questions in the chat. And I think I saw that there's already a question in the chat.
Actually, two questions. I'll go one by one. Does the legislature set the Superior Court districts? Looks like they're gerrymandered.
I think I might have seen the second question, which I think is pretty similar. But the answer is yes, the legislature sets our districts. I would prefer not to comment on whether or not they are gerrymandered or not, but you are welcome to draw your own conclusions about either the shapes or why Orange, Durham, and Chatham are no longer all together.
Okay.
I mean, in general, so the only other, I mean, in over time, you know, we've had as many as 8 districts. We've had as few as 4, at least in sort of modern times. And, you know, one of the ideas about the increasing the numbers of districts is it makes the job more appealing, especially to a person, male or female, with, you know, family or sort of home commitments, because they're not driving 2 hours and staying all week. They're more like within an hour, and you could typically, you know, go home every night. So that's one of the advantages of smaller divisions. Of course, it also cuts down on who is rotating through and where everyone is rotating. And, you know, to be fair, there is a real advantage to the overall idea about rotation. You know, it allows for more uniformity across the whole system. You know, if I, for example, always handle a certain kind of case a certain way, and I'm always in Orange County, well, over 10 years, you know, justice may be a little different in Orange County. But if I'm rotating around and Judge Rhinehart's coming through and 10 other judges are too, you know, it sort of evens out some of the discrepancies between us that are natural and normal and appropriate, but they are yet, you know, differences. And then also can have an effect on judge shopping and sort of trying to cherry pick who the judge is going to be. And so there are some real advantages to rotation. I don't want to mislead anyone on that. I'm in favor of it in general. And the next question, I think I'll turn to Judge Cabe.
Yeah, or Judge Rhinehart. I don't know if she saw the question pop up about recovery courts, and and different counties, they come about different ways. So I'll let her talk about Durham first, and then I'll talk about how it came to be in our district.
Well, certainly, thank you, Judge Cabe. So specialty courts come about because there is the justice system believes there is a need to focus heavily on the reasons why people are offending and coming to the court system. And so drug courts, I think, have been around, especially in Durham County, since probably about 25 years ago. And it was a way in which we could focus on those who were substance abuse users, and we could wrap around services around them so that hopefully we can give them some treatment so they wouldn't reoffend. The mental health treatment court came about because we saw a lot of those individuals who were appearing in front of us. They were suffering from mental health diagnoses. They were committing crimes because they were not medicated. They didn't have any type of support in the community, whether it was family support or community support. And so about 5 years ago, the Criminal Justice Resource Center, which is a center here in Durham, which analyzes county resources such as the jail, such as the court system, we all decided, I was a part of that team, we decided that we need a mental health treatment court to refer those cases, those criminal cases that are pending. And so when, you know, they have a case manager, they meet with the court either weekly, not weekly, bi-weekly, where we're able to monitor their process, encourage them, see if they're taking their medication. And we do the same thing with respect to drug treatment courts. And I think the data shows that it's been effective. And so that's how that came about. And of course, we need funding. And so usually the county, I see former County Commissioner Ellen Reckow, the county gives funding so that we can operate our court system, because we don't get all the funding oftentimes we need from our administration of court. So it's a good resource, I believe.
But there's another question. What cases are handled in Superior Court versus District Court?
Yeah, I can take that one, and then one of our Superior Court judges can elaborate on what they do. But as I think Judge Baddour talked a little bit about the similarities that we both do civil and criminal. From a district court judge's perspective, we have a much broader range of things that we do. So we cover criminal court, the lower level crimes, but we also do the first appearances for all crimes. So first degree murder charges come before us before they ever go before a Superior Court judge to consider bond or conditions of release. And so that's every charge. We also do all juvenile delinquency cases, which include anything from, again, first degree murder down to a class 3 misdemeanor for individuals who are under 18 years of age. We do DSS cases. So when individuals become involved with the Department of Social Services and petitions are filed seeking for the state to intervene into families to either remove children from their homes or to kind of have court supervision over a family's home because of problems with abuse, neglect, or dependency. We do those cases. We also do all of the hospital commitment hearings. So individuals who are involuntarily committed have a right to a hearing within 10 days, and we do those cases. So we do our treatment courts. We do all family law cases, child custody, divorce, equitable distribution, and those are cases regardless of the dollar amount. So we do those cases even in multi-million-dollar estates. And then we do the smaller general civil actions. So two unrelated people have a dispute. It's worth less than $25,000. It comes to district court. We do all of the domestic violence cases, both criminal charges and civil domestic violence actions. And then we also there's one other thing I was thinking of that small claims appeals. So if someone is all the evictions or small claims actions that are filed, individuals have a right to appeal to district court and get a new trial. So we do those as well. So we do a broad range of things, and it's usually lots of little short things. A few of those things can take a long time. But in contrast, Superior Court has a much narrower set of things they address, but their issues can last for weeks because they have they're higher dollar amounts at stake or longer prison sentences. So there's a lot more time and evidence that are produced in all of those cases. So maybe that's a general idea. You all can speak more directly on what Superior Court specifically does differently.
Judge Rhinehart, did she forget anything?
With respect to district court, no, Judge Cabe was very thorough with respect to how busy on a daily basis district court can be. It's like a quiz. You don't know what, you may have a summary ejectment, you may have a child, and you also have child support. You forgot about child support where parents, they have to support their children. And so, yes.
Jan, back to you.
Okay, I have a very long question for you, Judge Baddour, so you may want to read it. It's relative to the recent potential scandal involving Judge Clarence Thomas and his failure to disclose income as well as gifts, etc. The question is, Senator Whitehouse in Rhode Island was speaking on NPR and asked if pressure could be put on Chief Justice Roberts to insist that Supreme Court judges follow the same ethical rules as all other judges in the U.S. Senator Whitehouse suggested that the Judicial Conference of the U.S. might take the role of doing that. Do you expect that the National Judicial Conference will address this issue and take a position?
You know, I'm just going to be honest with you and tell you, I do not know what the National Judicial Conference is. So my supposition is that they will not, whoever they are. But, you know, I think the bigger, just to make sure everyone understands, you know, for example, in North Carolina, the Supreme Court has rules about the conduct of all the other judges except for the Supreme Court. And the same thing happens on the US, the federal level. So most judges in the country are subject to ethics and other rules about disclosure and so forth. It's only the highest courts that are not. They could self-regulate, and it's possible, you know, constitutional amendment or other pressure could be put on them. You know, it's a fascinating story with Justice Thomas. I will tell you, I have met him. I've had a bunch, about 10 of us in Superior Court went up for a Supreme Court tour. You know, I guess I'll just be perfectly frank. I wanted to not like him, but he was a perfectly lovely man. We don't see eye to eye on, you know, our judicial philosophy or our politics, but you know, he was wonderful to us. We expected to have about 5 or 10 minutes with him. After about an hour and a half, he said, "Who's going to take you on a tour of the rest of the building?" And we said, "I don't know, basically some kid." And he said, No, I'm doing this." Took us back into chambers for another hour, took us all over the building. So he was a lovely person. You know, I'm not making any defense of his actions or anything else, or his decisions or literally anything else about him. But, you know, ironically, one of the stories I remember most about our conversation was him saying how much he loved touring the country with his wife in their RV and parking in Walmart parking lots. And, you know, salt of the earth kinds of conversations, and, you know, all this stuff comes out. So I don't know. Anyway.
Okay. There's a follow-up to the ethics aspect of this, which is, why do Supreme Courts at state and federal level not have enforceable ethics rules? Why don't legislatures require this? If it's a constitutional issue, is it a constitutional issue? Is it a separation of powers issue? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I guess I would say, generally speaking, what happens is that the highest court typically sets the rules for all the courts, and they elect not to set them for themselves. It's as simple as that. And I do think there is some separation of powers, although the issue could be pressed. In other words, the legislature or the Congress could say, you know, these are the rules, and that fight could, you know, be litigated. Judge Cabe was just whispering about, so we have in North Carolina, we have a statement of economic interest that we're all required to file. It was due yesterday, as a matter of fact. And she was just asking me, and I don't know the answer to this, whether our own Supreme Court is required to file that document. We could look as we're talking here and see if they are required to, but essentially the legislature, judges, and a lot of appointed boards like the Board of Governors and so on and so forth, they all have to file the statement of economic interest.
Okay, thank you.
I can answer. I could talk about e-courts unless I've missed a question.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's perfect.
And we have missed one. We can go back to it. But so on e-court, for those who don't know, we have essentially in most of the state a paper-based system. So we literally have files, folders with all the papers in them. And we have mainframe database systems that were built in the 1970s to sort of manage or at least access and search for those files. We saw about, I don't know, close to 10 years ago that the system, well, we knew a lot longer before that. But anyway, we decided to do something about it about 10 years ago, and that is rolling out now. There is it's called eCourts. It's in Wake County. It's also in Harnett, Lee, and Johnston County. And it is a completely paperless system, both for the court files, for the management of the data, and for filing documents. Everything about it is all electronic and remote. What I can say about it is it has been a very bumpy start in those counties. It has been incredibly difficult and slow and filled with lots of speed bumps and hiccups and every other analogy you want to use. But I can also say that undoubtedly it is needed and the growing pains are worth it. When we get it in Orange, Chatham, and Durham, it will be a much better product because of the work our colleagues are doing over to the east of us. And like I said, it will make courts easier to access for everyone, lawyers, litigants, self-represented people, judges, just everyone. It'll make the system more transparent, more efficient, and it will be better, but it is slow getting there and it's hard getting there, and I can't deny that.
Okay, I have a question I'd like to put to Judge Rhinehart. Have you seen an increase in cases coming before you over the last several years? If so, what do you attribute that to? Is it local population growth, increase in drug problems, or something else?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm gonna have to put on my former district court judge hat. When I started in 2017, my rotation was the juvenile court with respect to the dependency, and that's the cases that Judge Cabe was talking about when the state intervenes and they file a petition to take custody of a child that there are allegations of abuse or neglect. I remember being able to get through most of my cases on a weekly basis, not a weekly session. So our sessions were once a month. And over time, also COVID, we began to have lots of cases being filed, where I felt like I was constantly continuing cases where I wasn't getting to the cases. And quite frankly, I don't know if it was because we had more cases or the fact that we needed more resources to deal with the cases that we had. I do think that, unfortunately, a lot of that was, garnered by people who are struggling with substance abuse, mental health, and also poverty. And I do think I saw a lot of those cases, more cases. We also saw a lot of family court cases where it was custody, it was restraining orders. And I think COVID, unfortunately, drove a lot of isolation, quite frankly, for families. And people came to the court system to try to make their lives better and needed us to decide their conflicts for them with it relates to their families. And so I know in Durham, the civil district dockets are jam-packed. They're setting, in family court, judges are setting matters on in December. And so you can imagine how that impacts families, because you have a temporary, most of the time you get to family court, you'll have the judge make a temporary decision with respect to custody. And you have to wait 6 months to have a permanent order so that the families can have some type of finality. That can really impact families. And so so yes, I did see a lot more cases. I could tell you how I felt the pressure and the gravity of really trying to do orders and staying late afterward to try to make sure that I was doing right by the facts that I heard and also by the decision that I needed to make. But yes, we felt it in Durham.
And I'll talk about the district court as well. Just like Judge Rhinehart described, we experienced an increase specifically in domestic violence cases. And I ran the statistics about a year ago, and we had experienced through COVID about a 30% increase, give or take, domestic violence cases across both counties. One was a little higher than the other, but at the moment I can't remember which was higher, Orange or Chatham, but both experienced a statistically significant increase. The other thing that we've experienced in district court is a huge increase in juvenile delinquency dockets,
Yes.
largely due to raise the age. And I think COVID has played a part in that, because we're seeing much more serious crime in juvenile delinquency court, which seems to be kind of in keeping with issues they're having in schools with after post-COVID. So I don't know the answer to all of that, but it is straining our system, both at the juvenile justice, the court system is really struggling there. And I think Judge Baddour can talk about how COVID has, or how things are in Superior.
Well, remember what Judge Cabe said earlier about essentially, I think the way to say it is the volume happens in district court, and the sort of depth happens in Superior Court. And so we've never had the caseload that they have in district court, and never will. But our cases take longer typically. And one thing I'll say is that because our volume was in general is so low, you know, our heavy days of an administrative criminal session may have, you know, a few hundred cases versus district court, which may have certainly over 1,000. Not that every one of those cases is going to be heard, but we've got to touch them on some level. And I bring that up because we didn't have court in Superior Court and Orange and Chatham counties over COVID for 1 week. We only lost 1 week of court. We were on WebEx, which is like Zoom, the very next week, and we kept up in Orange and Chatham. Now, we're also not Durham and we're not Wake. So even in Superior Court, we don't have the volume that a Durham or a Wake does, and we could manage it. But, you know, we've been able to keep up. We have not seen the increases in Superior Court, either because of COVID or really even a whole lot of backlog because of COVID, or anything else in the last few years. I would say that honestly, the trend 10 years ago when we built the Justice Center in Chatham County was the caseloads, even in Superior Court, were rising almost exponentially. That has leveled off. In fact, it's dropped in the last 10 years in Superior Court. Now, Chatham, we all know, is going to population boom, is in the midst of one now. And, you know, I expect that to change on some level. The more people you have, the more, you know, from family law all the way up to homicides, just everything, more of it happens, more people are around. So those numbers are going to change, but they have not changed yet.
Can I just follow up on something? Were you saying that a district court judge has to touch 1,000 cases a day or a week?
So, in Durham County, probably.
Yes.
In Orange County, we do have administrative traffic days that have close to 1,000 cases on the docket in one day. We've had dockets of 800 or 900 before, and again, they don't all get addressed, but a clerk has to touch them. The DAs have to touch them. We have to put new dates on them if they get continued. But our typical criminal court dockets in district court are in both counties, probably around 200 or so a day. And then so yes, in a week, we get 1,000 across both counties, and Durham probably has 1,000 in a day in Durham.
They may, in district court, I don't know, in criminal court, you may handle, not in a traffic court, but a regular criminal court, you may handle, I'm guessing, 50 pleas a day. In Superior Court, we might handle, 10, 15. They just, like I said, all along, everything just takes longer and goes slower in superior court due to the nature of the crimes and so forth.
I want to point out another significant difference in district and superior court, and the difference is kind of linked. And district court criminal court is not a court of record, so there's no recording of what goes on, and defendants have a right to appeal the verdict, but their appeals go to superior court for a new trial, and that is a court of record. So they may have the same trial all over again in superior court, and then they can go to the Court of Appeals from there if they don't like the outcome. But we don't record our proceedings, so a lot of times in district court we get the shortened version of things, and then when it goes to superior court, they have the expert witnesses and multiple witnesses in a case, where in district court they just put on the bare bones.
I think another way to think about that too is a person convicted in district court can appeal for any reason or no reason. Contrasting that with the Court of Appeals, where you have to say, well, the judge made an error, or they let in evidence they shouldn't have, or something like that. From district court, they just say, you know what, I don't like that. I got convicted. Let's do it again. And they get to come to superior court. And it makes sense because we say, everyone knows this, that you have a right to a trial by a jury of your peers. Well, I told you all earlier, and we got a question on this, but a reminder, district court judges have bench trials. There is no jury. So to preserve a person's right to a trial by a jury of their peers, even for a speeding ticket, they can appeal it to superior court and they get a jury trial. And so we take care of the volume for the most part. People sort of live with the result in district court because honestly, they get it right most of the time. And they just, they deal with it. But we also preserve that important constitutional right to a jury trial by saying, hey, you don't like it? Come on, do it again in superior court with a jury.
So let me add this as well, because you can have a jury trial in district court with respect to civil. And so you can have a summary ejectment trial. So if the tenant, usually it's the tenant that loses, they go to district court, they appeal, they can request a jury trial, and you put either 10 or 12 in a jury box, and you can decide that matter. So you can have a jury trial, and I've done 4 of them as a district court judge. So, but most of the time it's a bench trial criminally. It's a bench trial criminally on criminal matters.
If you take away one thing from this whole conversation, it's that every single thing we told you has an exception.
Right.
Only out another one.
No.
I'm glad you can laugh about it.
Yeah.
That's infuriating. So I have a question. How and when do judges set bail, and what options do you have?
Judge Rhinehart, we've elected you to take that first.
Oh, seriously? So, it's interesting. Okay, so, when individuals are charged with crimes, they're typically, they're brought before the magistrate. The officer swears out the probable cause, and oftentimes that person is incarcerated. However, the magistrate can, in fact, decide to give them, what's my word? Oh, what is it? What's the word, Cabe? Written promise to appear, yes. Or they can, once again, set a bond at that particular time. Depending upon if it's Friday, we always tell people, try not to get arrested on Friday, because you can't get in front of a judge unless you can post that bond. That is set until Monday. And so they come in front of typically a district court judge. And with respect to bond, we determine bond is not for punishment, but it's just set, a bond to ensure the person will come to court. So we look at a lot of things. We look at whether or not they had a criminal history. We look at with respect to whether or not they were out on bond for another criminal charge. We look at the seriousness of the charge. We look at whether or not, whether there's a firearm involved. So there's statutory factors that are set by the legislature with respect to what we can consider And also a lot of jurisdictions, they have bond guidelines. Durham County has a bond guideline that is set by the senior resident Superior Court judge and the chief district court judge, that are guidelines for setting bonds depending upon the classification of the crime. And those are presumptive, i.e. someone who does not have any type of criminal record. So you can use that as a baseline. Let's just say someone stole a bag of chips from a store, and that's a misdemeanor. It's class 1. If that person doesn't have any record and you feel like they will come to court, they don't have any previous failures to come to court, you can unsecure the bond, which they get out. They just have to come to their court date. So there are a lot of things. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's not a set like this is the amount, but there's some things pursuant to the law, which there's no presumption. It's a rebuttable presumption with respect to where the defendant or the attorney can present factors to the court. But it's not, I hate to say it, it's not a right or wrong answer. You do the best you can in setting a bond and hope that, when you do it, the community is safe and that you don't, set a wrong bond where someone gets out and then they end up committing another crime, because I can be quite honest, judges don't really like that because, I feel like I haven't done what I need to do, but we do the best we can with the information that we deem is reliable in setting those bonds. And I hope that was clear. I know it might lead to additional questions, but they decided to give me the questions first. And so, but yeah, so, and I will tell you, in Durham County, we set bonds every day. So we are running a jail court every day, Monday through Friday. And there's a judge who is specifically assigned to the jail. We do it now over WebEx, which is, I really like, because I didn't like going into the jail and hearing the doors close and someone buzzing me in into the court. We do have the community there welcome to come and watch if there are cases that they're interested in. I do, hear when there's a victim present. I also ask the state, have you talked to the victim? Because we have certain cases, we have victims' rights where we need to hear from the victims before we set a bond. We can also make bond conditions when there's DV or some assault. We can certainly order the defendant as a condition of bond not to have any contact, not to assault, threaten, or harass. So we could do a lot in the realm of bond. So anyway, that's my long answer.
Thanks,
I have a follow-up question. When someone is arrested for a crime that involves a gun, can you require that the gun be removed until trial?
We can set conditions of release, which would include not to possess.
Is this a phone?
I'd like to, if I could, just take one moment to say that I'm really proud of Orange County for implementing about a year ago. Really, I guess I'm giving credit in some part to Judge Cabe and myself, but really there was a team of folks that worked on this. We have a bail policy that I think is very progressive and yet very attuned to keeping the community safe. We have directed our magistrates and our judges to consider alternatives to jail and start there. And so we don't have, the shoplifter of 2 steaks spending 2 weeks in jail. We have the person charged with murder in jail. And so we think we are getting it right. And as a rule, keeping the right people in custody who are a threat to the safety of the community or may not appear in court. And we're letting the folks out who are not those things. And so, that's a really, really important shift in the criminal justice system. I think it helps with our racial justice. I think it helps with equity and with keeping families together, with keeping people working and in the community. For those of you in Chatham, I want you to know that we're working on the same policy to go to Chatham. In general, the things we do in our district are district-wide, but basically we got some grant funding to help us identify these issues and work on it. on a county level, and we're taking it to Chatham soon. So the same type of policy I anticipate us implementing very soon.
Yeah.
I also want to add, I'm sorry, Samantha. You want to go ahead? Because I do.
I just have a short thing to add. I'll say in both Orange and Chatham counties, one reason that we're able to utilize such a policy is both counties have a very robust pretrial release supervision program. And in Orange County, it's been established longer and it kind of encompasses more things. Kate Finhagen is our director of our criminal justice resource department. And in Chatham County, Renita Fox is the director of our pretrial services. And both of those groups help us by gathering information and also supervising people that otherwise would have to stay in jail or likely have a secured bond were it not for those programs. And I think Durham has a similar program as well. So that really helps us. Those are all county funded. So you can thank your county commissioners in Chatham and Durham for funding that program.
I also want to add as well, I'm sorry, Samantha. Also in Durham, we do have the district attorney's office. They are constantly looking at those very, very low bonds of people who have sat, in jail maybe 20 days on something like they stole a steak or something. And so they will look and oftentimes bring us those bond reduction orders. And I typically sign them because you got someone who honestly is in jail because, of poverty. And so I agree with Judge Baddour. We don't want those people incarcerated. And so Durham County is pretty progressive with respect to looking to make sure that the people that we have incarcerated are those people that really pose the greatest risk and danger to the community.
Okay, Judge Cabe, I have a question for you. If an individual elects to have a jury trial in district court and they want to appeal, can they if there's a compelling reason?
So, yeah, so in district court, again, jury trials are limited to civil matters, and not all civil matters are entitled to a jury trial. So, for example, child custody matters are not entitled to a jury trial. DSS cases do not get a jury trial. They appeal directly to the Court of Appeals. But certain types of things, such as alimony, or as Judge Rhinehart said, some small claims appeals such as evictions, they can request a jury trial. And they certainly have a right to appeal just like anybody else. But when they're appealing to the Court of Appeals, it's just like someone appealing from Superior Court. They have to show judicial error or some error of law, either error of law or fact procedure in order to prevail. That's different from an appeal to Superior Court from a district court criminal matter. As Judge Baddour pointed out, they don't have to have a reason. They can just appeal it to get a second bite of the apple. We really try in our district to limit those types of appeals by the district court judges articulating the basis for our opinions. We pretty much all try to do that to give everybody an idea of what we're basing our opinions on, to give the attorneys kind of a preview of, hey, this probably isn't going to fly in Superior Court either. So I think some districts have a whole lot of those in Superior Court. Our district's pretty lucky we don't have a whole.
All right. I don't know who to direct this to, but I'll put it out there. One of our members mentions that years ago she was an inpatient psychiatry nurse and attended mental health commitment hearings at UNC Hospital. Does this still happen?
I think that's me, because we do all of those, and yes, they do still happen. Throughout COVID, we did them via WebEx. As of a few months ago, we're back in the hospital. So unless the patient has COVID, we're all in the same room together and we're doing them in person again.
Vicki, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, we're moving towards the end of our session, so I wanted to ask each of you, what's the hardest part of your job and what's the most gratifying? And let's start with Judge Rhinehart.
The hardest part of my job, I'll be quite honest, is sometimes when I have to incarcerate people, I'll be quite frank. I know sometimes I hear their stories, and I know that life hasn't always been kind to them, and oftentimes I don't have any discretion, but they have to go to prison. But even in those situations, I try to, once again, just do what I have to do and still treat them with dignity and respect. What is the most, and also I'll be honest, the tough part of the job, and I know it will be tough for me, is seeing young people commit such heinous crimes. We are having a surge in Durham weekly with respect to 16 and 17-year-olds who are committing murders. And so that is tough for the entire community, not just the court system, because people are expecting us to do something about it and be the solution, when in fact we are reacting to larger systemic issues in the community. With respect, the most gratifying part of the job is, quite frankly, really listening and being able to help people, and know that they've been heard, and that you listen to the facts and you did the best that you could, and they walk away feeling that they've been heard, and also sometimes vindicated, which does happen, is something that I like. I also like, personally, I'm a nerd, so I love to learn, and I love the quirkiness, and I'm researching everything, and I'm looking at everything, and I'm just, I'm just excited. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity and to share the bench with just great judges like Judge Baddour and former Judge Cabe. So yeah.
I don't know if you care which one of us goes next, but I will say that in district court, for me, the hardest thing in my job are the cases dealing with child custody, whether that's in DSS court, and we're talking about separating parents from their children in a abuse, neglect, dependency context, or even between two parents. The child custody cases are really difficult because we all know there's no such thing as a perfect parent. And so we're having to sit there in judgment of people who, when we ourselves are not perfect, and try to make a decision for people who can't agree about their children. That's a really heavy burden. I will say the most rewarding thing that I've experienced so far as a district court judge has been in our recovery courts. Seeing someone who's had a decades-long addiction problem turn their life around in a year is a pretty amazing experience. So that's the most rewarding thing for me.
I know we're about out of time, but for me, let me just say that you all have in front of you, if I may say, I think three very, pretty remarkably empathetic judges. I mean, I have to say, and I would be honored to consider myself in the company of these two, but not all judges care so much. And so I think we're lucky in this area to have judges like Judge Rhinehart and Judge Cabe. But for me, people will see a headline about, homicides and wow, isn't that hard? For me, it's the sex offense cases, especially juveniles who have been the victims of sex offenses, and they're still alive and able to be in the courtroom speaking their truth. It is so hard. I cry in court because it brings me to tears, and I have to just admit that and own that. And I don't think it makes me a worse or a lesser judge. It's just the human that I am, and it affects me. It's not to say that it impacts my decision about whether a person is guilty or not, but I'm just saying once that's been established and I'm hearing from a victim, it affects me a lot. The thing that is most rewarding for me probably is working with juries. I love seeing the people who almost without question do not want to be there for jury duty, who typically leave the court process grateful for the experience, interested in the court system, And I hope going out and being an advocate for the value of our system of justice. And to me, there's nothing more important.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all so much for this. It's very informative session, but I think also three amazing judges. I don't think we anticipated, unless we've heard from you before, how informative, but also just dedicated to public service you all are. And we really appreciate your service to our communities and to our democracy, I would say. Thank you again. Why don't we close now and wish all of you a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the work that you do. Good night.